So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. In this presentation, we're going to provide a very high-level overview of the SB 1383 regulatory requirements. We will address special districts and how they are impacted by the regulations specifically. Using data from the CSDA and CalRecycle, we estimate there are approximately 79 special districts that provide solid waste collection services and would fall under the jurisdiction requirements for these regulations. Special districts that do not fall under jurisdiction requirements are still considered a generator of organic waste and do have some requirements to comply with as well. Next slide, please. Organic waste comprises 2/3 of our waste stream, and food waste alone is the largest material waste stream in California. Next slide. Landfills are the largest producer of methane in California at 41% of total emissions, and the legislature enacted SB 1383 to reduce the global warming gases, including methane specifically, which are the most potent and considered short-lived climate pollutants. Next slide. SB 1383 builds upon the mandatory commercial organics recycling law. California jurisdictions and special districts that provide solid waste collection services have been implementing this law since 2016, and that's mandatory commercial organics recycling, AB 1826. SB 1383 sets a goal for Californians to reduce disposal of organic waste by 50% by 2020 and by 75% by 2025. These targets use the 2014 waste characterization study measurements when 23 million tons of organic waste were disposed of in California. These disposal reductions will reduce at least 8 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually by 2030. SB 1383 additionally establishes a target to recover 20% of currently disposed edible food for human consumption by 2025. Next slide. So I'm going to provide a brief history of the rulemaking process so far. The formal rulemaking process began on January 18th, 2019. The department held 5 comment periods, 2 formal hearings, and a public workshop during the formal rulemaking process. The department released 3 drafts of regulatory text for comments and recommendations, and provided over 150 days for comment on the regulatory text and rulemaking documents. In January, CalRecycle submitted the regulations to the Office of Administrative Law. OAL had some minor revisions that did not affect the policy of the regulations. So once we got the regulations and recommendations back from OAL, we updated the draft regulations. That CalRecycle held another formal comment period from April 20th, 2020 to May 20th. And CalRecycle will submit the rulemaking package to OAL this summer. Our deadline is no later than the first week of September, but we anticipate submitting well before that deadline. We expect OAL will adopt the regulations in late summer or early fall of this year. Jurisdictions must have their programs in place on January 1, 2022. CalRecycle can begin enforcement actions on jurisdictions and other entities starting January 1, 2022. And in 2024, jurisdictions will be required to take enforcement against non-compliant entities. Next slide. So this slide provides an overview of the implementation requirements for jurisdictions. And SB 1383 defines a jurisdiction as a city or county, or a city and a county, or a special district that provides solid waste collection services. Special districts that do not provide solid waste collection services and are not considered a jurisdiction instead fall under the definition of a non-local entity and have compliance requirements under Article 5. A non-local entity is defined as an entity that is an organic waste generator, but is not subject to the control of a jurisdiction's regulations related to solid waste. These entities include special districts. CalRecycle will help jurisdictions prepare for implementation, and I will talk about tools at the end of this presentation. Next slide. Jurisdictions, including special districts that provide solid waste collection services, will be required to adequately resource the following programs and activities: providing organic waste collection services to all residents and businesses, establishing edible food recovery program for all Tier 1 and Tier 2 commercial edible food generators, conduct education and outreach to all generators, plan and secure access for recycling and edible food recovery capacity, monitor compliance and conduct enforcement. And monitoring and education begins January 1, 2022, and local enforcement actions will start January 1, 2024. The requirements also include adopting an ordinance or enforceable mechanism consistent with the regulatory requirements prior to 2022. Next slide. This slide shows that every department in local government will be affected by the regulations and have a significant role to play. We are less familiar with the structure of special districts versus a traditional city or county, but the purpose of the slide is to show that coordination will be necessary for a special district that provides solid waste collection services to adequately implement the regulatory requirements. Jurisdictions should be thinking and planning for the staffing they will need, whether direct service providers will be tasked to staff some activities, and if they will contract with other entities such as environmental health inspectors or consultants. Next slide. This slide emphasizes that jurisdictions are required to provide an organic waste collection service to all residents and businesses. This means automatically providing collection service to residents and businesses rather than allowing them to voluntarily subscribe to service. Special districts that provide solid waste collection services will need to implement programs in this manner and to all of these entities, and should begin planning for this change if they have not already started planning and implementing this. A jurisdiction can implement the following services: a one container system, which requires all contents be transported to a facility that recovers 75% of the organic content; a two container system, in which the container that includes organic waste and garbage must be transported to a facility that recovers 75% of the organic content; or a three container system, in which the organic waste is source separated. Jurisdictions must have enforceable requirements on haulers that collect organic waste within the jurisdiction for commercial and residential generators and for self-haulers. Under Article 5, non-local entities, including special districts, must prevent and reduce the generation of organic waste by either subscribing to and complying with the requirements of an organic waste collection service, or by self-hauling organic waste to a facility that processes source-separated organic waste. Next slide. Jurisdictions, including special districts that provide solid waste collection services, are responsible for implementing an edible food recovery program. This program includes assessing capacity of existing food recovery, establishing the food recovery program and expanding existing infrastructure if necessary, inspecting commercial edible food generators for compliance, and education and outreach. Next slide. Jurisdictions must conduct annual education and outreach to businesses and residents and to commercial edible food generators. Educational material must be linguistically accessible to non-English speaking residents. And CalRecycle will have model materials in multiple languages that jurisdictions may use. And I'll go over this later in the presentation. Next slide. Each jurisdiction will have a minimum procurement target for recovered organic waste products linked to its population. However, this section in the regulations specifically defines a jurisdiction as a city or a county or a city and a county. for the purposes of implementing that specific requirement. So special districts that provide solid waste collection services will not need to implement that specific procurement requirement. However, the population in a special district is included in the jurisdiction's procurement target. And as such, special districts may be included in a jurisdiction's portfolio to meet its procurement requirements if a direct service provider relationship exists. SB 1383 also requires that jurisdictions, including special districts that provide waste collection services, procure recycled content paper products and printing and writing paper when it is available at the same price or less than virgin material. Paper products include, but are not limited to, paper janitorial supplies, cartons, wrapping, packaging, file folders, hanging files, corrugated boxes, tissue, and toweling. Next slide. Jurisdictions will have to adopt an ordinance or enforceable requirement that requires compliance with CalGreen and water efficient landscape ordinance requirements. We at CalRecycle are not as familiar with how special districts pass ordinances or similar mandates. So this is something CalRecycle will need to better understand in collaboration with CSDA and the Institute for Local Government to be able to provide adequate assistance for special districts on this requirement. Next slide. Each jurisdiction must plan for adequate capacity for recycling organic waste and for edible food recovery. Each county will lead this effort by coordinating with the jurisdictions, including the special districts that provide solid waste collection services, to estimate existing new and/or expanded capacity. Jurisdictions must demonstrate access to recycling capacity through existing contracts, franchise agreements, or other documented arrangements. If capacity cannot be guaranteed, then each jurisdiction within the county that lacks capacity must submit an implementation schedule to CalRecycle that includes specified timelines and milestones, including funding for the necessary recycling or edible food recovery facilities. The county must collect data from the jurisdictions on a specified schedule and report to CalRecycle. Jurisdictions are required to provide the required data to the county within 120 days. The start year for planning and reporting is 2022, and that report must cover the years from 2022 through 2024. After the report that's due in 2024, subsequent reports will be due every 5 years and will plan for a 10-year horizon. Next slide. By January 1, 2022, jurisdictions are required to have an enforcement mechanism or ordinance in place, but are not required to enforce until 2024. Between January 2022 and December 2023, jurisdictions will need to identify businesses in violation of the regulations and provide educational material to those generators. After January of 2024, jurisdictions must take progressive enforcement against organic waste generators that are not in compliance with the requirements. Special districts that provide solid waste collection services should begin planning for these enforcement requirements so that they are in compliance January 1 of 2022. Next slide. This slide goes over the jurisdiction enforcement and inspection program requirements for the recycling program, which includes a desk audit to verify businesses have service and route reviews to inspect for contamination. For single container services, the jurisdiction must verify with the hauler or haulers that the contents are transported to a high diversion organic waste processing facility and that the facility is meeting the requirements of the organic content recovery rate. If a special district that provides solid waste collection services is not already conducting annual compliance reviews for businesses subject to AB 341 and 1826, or contamination monitoring for regulated organic waste generators, they should begin planning this now so they are in compliance with this requirement by January 1, 2022. Next slide. Jurisdictions also have enforcement and inspection requirements for the edible food recovery program. Inspections on Tier 1 edible food generators begin in 2022 and begin in 2024 for Tier 2 edible food generators. This includes verifying that those generators have agreements with a food recovery organization and verifying that the food generators are not intentionally spoiling food that can be recovered. Many jurisdictions are planning on utilizing health inspectors that are already visiting those edible food generators. Special districts that provide solid waste collection services will be required to implement the enforcement and inspection program for Tier 1 and Tier 2 edible food generators that are located within the special district. These special districts should be planning for this by identifying Tier 1 generators and determining how they will implement this program. Next slide. To reduce the amount of reporting, jurisdictions are required to maintain records and keep all information in an implementation record. CalRecycle staff may review the implementation record as part of an audit of the program. Record keeping, annual reporting, and CalRecycle audits for special districts that provide solid waste collection services will likely be something new for these special districts. Next slide. The regulations build in a compliance review and enforcement process that provides substantial timelines for jurisdictions to come into compliance before penalties are issued. Low population and rural waivers also delay or exclude implementation of the requirements. Next slide. To assist jurisdictions with the implementation of SB 1383, HF&H Consultants, in collaboration with Diversion Strategies and Deborah Kaufman Consulting, have worked with CalRecycle to develop 4 model tools. Those tools are a model franchise agreement, a model mandatory organics disposal reduction ordinance, a model organic waste product procurement policy for compost, mulch, renewable gas, electricity from biomass, and recycled content paper, and a model edible food recovery agreement. These tools will be available once the regulations are approved by OAL. CalRecycle and HF&H will also be hosting statewide webinars to provide an in-depth presentation about those tools. Special districts that provide solid waste collection services will be required to adopt an ordinance, so they may find these tools helpful. In addition, special districts may find helpful the model franchise agreement and model procurement policy for purchasing recycled content paper. Next slide. CalRecycle is developing model signage to help businesses and jurisdictions implement AB 827. This law amended the mandatory commercial recycling and mandatory commercial recycling, commercial organics recycling laws, so AB 341 and 1826. This law is intended to educate and involve consumers in achieving the state's recycling goals by requiring businesses to make recycling and organics recycling bins available to customers that purchase and consume products on the premises. Full service sit-down restaurants must have containers available for employees to separate the recyclables and organic waste for the customers. Model signage is being developed for 3, 2, and single stream sorting systems. These will be available in English, Spanish, Mandarin, Punjabi, Russian, and Korean. The materials are designed to include the most widely acceptable and prohibited items. Signage will be SB 1383 compliant and will be available on our website no later than July 1st of this year. Special districts that provide solid waste handling services will find these models helpful in supporting businesses with the AB 827 and SB 1383 regulatory requirements. Next slide. Another big effort that CalRecycle is currently working on is our statewide outreach and education campaign. This project includes consumer-based social marketing research about the most effective outreach models for recycling communications and the most effective messages to change recycling behavior and meet our goals. This is a $15.9 million campaign over 3 years for outreach and education, and that kicked off in spring of this year. Next slide. Regarding market development, California has some programs to help develop the infrastructure needed to achieve SB 1383's targets. CalRecycle currently provides funding through its greenhouse gas grant and loan programs and Recycling Market Development Zone Loan Program. Over the last 4 years, the GHG grant programs have provided $86 million in funding to 31 recycling projects, and the GHG loan program has provided funding for 4 projects. The RMDZ loan program has provided $151 million in funding to 201 recycling manufacturers in California. CalRecycle also works closely with the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, known as GOBIZ, to assist manufacturers that want to site or expand their operations in the state. Next slide. So that ends our presentation. A slight disclaimer, please note that until the regulations are approved and adopted by the Office of Administrative Law, any guidance that has been given about the regulation language is preliminary at this point. If you have not yet read the regulations or the educational materials that are on our website, we encourage you to go to our website and also sign up for our listserv so you can receive updates regarding SB 1383. So thank you for this opportunity to update you on SB 1383. It is a lot of information to digest, but we are here to help you out. And I'm going to pass along this presentation to Nicole with ILG.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nicole Enright, and I'm an associate manager at the Institute for Local Government. Our mission is to help local government leaders navigate complexity, increase capacity, and build trust in their communities. Next slide, please. ILG is the nonprofit affiliate of CSDA, the State Association of Counties, and the League of California Cities. And we focus on leadership and governance, youth and civic engagement, sustainability and resilience, and public engagement. We support local governments in implementing policies on the ground, which is why I'm here today. We're also here to support you and build your capacity to design and deliver effective and authentic education and outreach materials. Whether this is in the form of flyers, social media posts, mailers, or others, we're here to help you build your capacity to make sure your audience has the information they need to participate in organic waste recycling. Next slide, please. So quickly, before I dive into some public engagement and education tips, just wanted to pause to recap what we just heard. And note that this slide does not cover everything under 1383, but shows some highlights about what this means for your agency. So we just heard that your agency is required to take action to help meet the statewide targets. This is important for your agency because you'll need to show that you're making an effort by establishing organic waste recycling and edible food recovery programs, or for your agency if you're a generator of waste, and if applicable for the communities that you serve. So education and outreach will be a key component in fostering staff, consultant, contractor, and community participation in organic waste recycling. And as we heard, CalRecycle will be producing some model outreach for your agency to utilize, but there might be more that you might need to develop, and ILG is here to support your education and engagement efforts. Next slide, please. To support your agency on some of the programming and infrastructure elements related to 1383, I invite you to check out ILG's Recycling Resource Center. It provides case studies highlighting local agency programs, resources on franchise agreements, financing, siting, infrastructure planning, and more. We'll be sure to keep this updated with the latest resources from CalRecycle, and we'll be adding upcoming funding opportunities to support you as well. So for example, there is a US EPA anaerobic digestion funding opportunity that local agencies are eligible for. That's open through July 14th, and we can share that information if you're interested. But there are resources to help you, and ILG is here to support you. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about how to tailor outreach and education resources to your community to ensure that you're reaching diverse groups with the information that is simple and easy to understand. This organic recycling can be complicated for people who may not be familiar with the topic. So effective education and outreach materials should be easy to understand and accessible for multiple groups. One way to ensure that is to take a moment to think about who is in your community. What are the demographics you're trying to reach? So CalRecycle mentioned that the flyers will be available in multiple languages, and ensure that your additional education and outreach materials are translated accurately by a professional translator. We encourage you to choose outreach methods that are appropriate for your community and pursue multiple outreach methods to ensure you're reaching diverse groups that may or may not have access to the internet. And of course, we need to ensure outreach is considerate of social distancing guidelines in COVID-19. So not only will you likely need to post signage above bins that show how to sort your materials, putting recycling in this bin, organic waste in this bin. You'll also need to develop materials to share with your community members and your staff members that this is a program that we all need to work together to reach the targets. So that might include developing social media posts, sending out e-updates through your e-newsletters, posting something on your website, maybe creating some bill inserts or mailers. Next slide, please. So we encourage you to work with community partners such as local CBOs, faith-based organizations, and others to develop the messaging for your outreach and education materials. This will help ensure the message is culturally relevant and is available in appropriate languages. Community partners can also help to distribute this message and these materials to community members and engage with folks on this program and these topics. Next slide, please. So to recap, your agency's success in organic waste recycling partly depends on the education and engagement approach you design. So to start, think about who your target audience is and design a variety of outreach methods that are relevant and appropriate for the community you're trying to reach. Work with community partners to distribute the message, especially during COVID-19. If you can't get to them in person, think about the multiple channels available that are either high-tech or low-tech, and ensure you have enough time to craft the message. Partner with community leaders to refine it and translate it accurately. Make sure that what you're talking about is culturally relevant and that it's easy for folks to understand what organic recycling is and what goes in which bin and why it's important to do this. And it's important to diversify your engagement activities to reach the most people possible. Next slide, please. So these principles are especially important when trying to reach beyond the usuals that participate in local agency engagements. A lot of time we think about these in terms of people who attend public meetings or provide public comment. But when we're trying to facilitate and foster engagement in a statewide program, we need to think about those who traditionally maybe haven't been participating for a variety of reasons. Maybe English is not their first language. Maybe they've been historically excluded or disadvantaged, or are busy with work and kids and may not have more than a minute to receive information. So our communities are comprised of many ethnicities, cultures, ages, races, sexual orientations, incomes, abilities. So being inclusive in your outreach can help us all to work together to reach the statewide targets. And next slide, please. And while your traditional outreach methods may have involved tabling at a community event or in-person meetings, COVID-19 has significantly changed this landscape of public engagement, as we all know. So new technologies and opportunities are upon us to comply with social distancing. And these shifts to digital and virtual are likely here to stay in at least some form. So we encourage you to test them out if you haven't, such as Zoom, text polling, online surveys, or dashboards, social media. And you can learn more about these high and low tech tools in an upcoming webinar on June 30th that ILG will be hosting together with some community partners. We'll feature some case stories on everything from using local agency television stations together with text polling, or providing live simultaneous interpretation during Zoom meetings. There's a variety of tools and methods you can utilize, and ILG is here to support your engagement efforts. And next slide, please. And lastly, during this time when so much is shifting to online and virtual, ensuring language access is more important than ever. Access issues are heightened because of COVID. So take time to think about the audience that you're trying to reach, work with community leaders, translators, and interpreters to help facilitate inclusive participation. Next slide, please. And we have free public engagement resources to help you get started, especially in designing your outreach and engagement approach. We'd really recommend checking out our tiers framework. We also offer trainings, which we'll share information on upcoming. We don't have any scheduled in person yet at this time, but we will online. So these are available on, it's a step-by-step approach to designing public engagement at any level. We also have free interpretation equipment that you can check out and loan, and you can visit our website for dozens of tip sheets on inclusive and authentic engagement, education, and outreach methods. Next slide, please. And we encourage you to stay connected. As the nonprofit affiliate of CSTA, we share out information on our social media channels regarding regulations such as 1383, resources to help you get started, to help you design your outreach and engagement approach, and share case studies and highlights. So please stay connected. And next slide. Okay, so before we dive into Q&A, we wanted to pause for a poll. We just heard a lot of information, and we'd like to get a sense of your thinking at this time so we can tailor our discussion, and also to demonstrate that this is a way to engage with community members if you're going to be doing a Zoom call. So you should see a poll that has popped up on your screen. Please take a moment and fill out these 6 questions. You'll want to scroll down to the bottom so that you can see all of the questions. There's 6 total. and some where it says something else. Feel free to type in your answer in the chat box. We want to hear from you. So we'll give it a few minutes for the poll. And Jennifer, please let me know when we have kind of a critical mass of responses.
Absolutely. Is everybody seeing the poll questions? Not seeing any polls being answered, so. There we go.
Yeah, thanks for taking a few minutes to tell us more about you, your familiarity with the statewide targets, if you're already composting organic waste. We'd love to get a sense of your level of preparedness. And maybe what are some of the things that you heard today that are causing you a bit of anxiety? How can we help? We'd love to know. Give it just maybe 30 more seconds, and then we'll recap the results and dive into some discussion and Q&A. Sorry if you can hear my dog snoring. It's part of working from home, right?
All right, Julia, I think we've got the majority here.
Great. Would you be able to close the poll and share results? Awesome. All right. So thanks everyone for filling this out. Looks like a vast majority of folks were familiar with the statewide targets before today's webinar. Great news. Looks like we have kind of a variety of current composting practices. Your agency's level of preparedness is you're actively preparing, a majority of you, and you're somewhat active, or some have a program in place. I'd love to hear from those that have a program in place already. You know, what are some of the promising practices or lessons learned that you're encountering? Looks like 74% of folks anticipate their agency will be in compliance. Nobody responded that this isn't on their radar, which, good news. And a variety of answers on which aspects of the target might be the most challenging. Getting residents on board, we hear you with that. I think that's part of some of the support that ILG can provide to your agency around outreach and engagement. Those upcoming tools from CalRecycle will absolutely be critical in that. A lot of folks mentioned food rescue, maybe CalRecycle. We can talk about that a little bit in our discussion. And something else in the chat box. Feel free to type that in there. And then areas that you need the most help in, looking like resident engagement, commercial engagement, understanding the rule, regulations, and targets. A wide variety of things. So thank you so much for filling out this poll and helping us to understand how best we can help you and to tailor our Q&A. So I'll turn it back to Jennifer to lead us through the questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for attending, and thank you to the ladies that we have here. So we are going to open it up for Q&A at this time. To ask your question, you can hover across the bottom, click the Q&A box there and type it in, and we will get that discussion going. We do have one question already, ladies, that I'll go ahead and pose to you if you're ready. The question is, are you working with national chains, i.e. 7-Eleven, to backhaul backhaul packaged foods for composting?
Sure, this is Kara. I'll take that one. So we have been working with a number of national chains, not 7-Eleven specifically, but Taco Bell, for example. Depending on the type of company, will depend on whether they're going to backhaul food waste and cardboard and paper to a distribution center versus participating in the local program. So what we see are supermarkets, for example, tend to have backhauling programs, but companies like 7-Eleven, for example, or a Taco Bell or McDonald's are going to participate in the local collection program. So I hope that answers the question. If not, you can send a follow-up.
Okay, fantastic. Once again, if you have a question, you can post it in the Q&A box there, and we will get the ladies to answer it. Don't have any right now. So guys, if you have a question, just pop it in. Going through until we may have another one or close it up. Ladies, do y'all have any final thoughts or things that you would like to add?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add, I was thinking about some of the polling question responses. And if there's ever a need that you would like the local assistant staff to speak to, say, your board, or you know, I saw something about just educating decision makers. We're happy to make a presentation, whether it's remotely or in person, if that permits down the road. So we'd be happy to help support you in any way we can to help with any education.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kara. All right, we do have a few questions now. Thank you, everybody. The first one, will local jurisdiction be given organic recycling credit for those businesses that do backhauling?
Sure. I'll take this one, and then Julia, if you want to add in. So the way that the measurement works, it is a statewide measurement. So unlike currently under AB 939, for example, the measurement is not at the local jurisdiction level. So it's statewide measurement, but the jurisdictions are responsible for implementing the program. So we talked about the enforcement and inspection aspect of the requirements. So for a special district that provides solid waste collection service, you would need to make sure that that company is actually backhauling their organic material. And remember, when we're talking about organics, we're talking about a larger set of material types than is currently required under 1826. So we're talking about all the fibers, so paper, cardboard, and then traditional organics, food waste, green waste, wood waste, etc. So that's how it would work. So you would be ensuring that all of those businesses are recycling in some fashion. And if their choice is to backhaul, you would need to make sure that they are backhauling all of those organic recyclables.
Fantastic. We've got some good questions here. Are there set regional areas as part of the program, or how did the districts work together? Are there set regional areas as part of the program, or how did the districts work together? Is that?
I might need a little follow-up from Craig.
Okay.
I understand the question on this one, but the
Okay.
way that the regulation is set up is that a jurisdiction is defined by a specific area. So a special district that provides solid waste collection service is an area, a city is an area, a county unincorporated is an area. The regulations are set up particularly for capacity planning, such that the jurisdictions, the city, the county, and any special districts that provide solid waste collection services will need to work together for capacity planning. I think there would also, I think what we're seeing are counties starting to plan regionally and share resources. So I think it'd be really important for special districts that provide solid waste collection services to begin collaborating with the county, whether that's on partnering on education and messaging, et cetera. So, and we're happy to help facilitate those conversations.
Perfect. I think that answered the question, Kara, the county, et cetera. So, okay. What are the best enforcement strategies to plan for?
Enforcement strategies to plan for. Again, Cindy, I may need follow-up for you on this question. So the regulations lay out very specific enforcement actions that will need to take place. The model enforcement ordinance or model ordinance that CalRecycle will be releasing, tentatively we're planning for September, will provide you a full outline of what needs to be in that ordinance. Julie, is there anything else you want to add to the question?
So in the talking points in the PowerPoint, we didn't go into a lot of detail on these things, but yeah, for jurisdictions in terms of enforcement of the requirements, so that starts in 2024. And like Kara said, there's a very specific process that's outlined in the regulations for enforcement. And that includes issuing notices of violation when a organic waste generator is not in compliance with the regulations, and penalties at the very end of the day. But yeah, there's a lot of information I could provide. So I would recommend reading that portion of the regulations and then reading the talking points more thoroughly to answer that question, because it is very detailed.
Yeah, and then seeing the model ordinance when it comes out, because I think that's going to be most helpful for you.
And to follow up on the model ordinance, Kara, you said it's going to be made available around September.
Yeah.
And the question is, are they required to use the model ordinance?
No, they are not required to utilize the model ordinance. However, it will be important that all of the components of the model ordinance are captured in whatever enforcement mechanism that a special district has. So it'll be important to utilize that, because what we did is we took the regulations and all of the requirements in the regulation, and those are all included in the model. The model does have some items that are optional, but it's clearly laid out. So I would certainly use the model ordinance as almost like a checklist if you're doing your own ordinance or updating your own enforcement ordinances.
Okay.
Also, just wanted to add that in September, we will be doing statewide webinars to roll out the ordinance as well as the other model tools. And we will be sure to collaborate with the CSDA to make sure that everyone gets information about those statewide webinars. And if you're not able to participate in the webinar when it's scheduled, they will be recorded.
Fantastic. Okay. Will the impacts of COVID-19 slow down the implementation of the law that you see?
That's a great question. Right now, the law is a law, so it's in statute. Unless statute changes, we are not expecting the timelines for the requirements to take effect to change. So as of now, we're moving forward with that January 1, 2022 implementation date. Certainly, you know, like for example, us being here on this webinar today, there are certainly challenges as it relates to COVID-19 and implementation. We're here to support the special districts and your implementation. And our goal is to ensure that you're in compliance on January 1, 2022. So anything we can do to support that, we're here to help.
We have a couple of questions about just some definitions. So first off, could you define backhauling?
Sure. Backhauling is where a business does not participate in the local collection program. They bundle up those recyclables and organic materials and they backhaul them typically to a distribution center. The distribution center, those materials are consolidated, and then in some cases they're recycled on site or sent elsewhere for recycling. So that is the explanation of backhauling.
Great. And can you explain the difference in tier 1 and tier 2 edible food generators?
Yeah, let me read from the definitions. So first of all, a tier 1 commercial edible food generator means a commercial edible food generator that's one of the following: a supermarket, a grocery store with a total facility size equal to or greater than 10,000 square feet, a food service provider, a food distributor, a wholesale food vendor. So that's tier 1. Supermarket, grocery store, equal to greater than 10,000 square feet, food service provider, food distributor, and wholesale food vendor. So as you can imagine, these are entities that produce a lot of potentially edible food. So that's why they're in the tier 1, and they are the first group that has requirements. Tier 2 commercial edible food generators include a restaurant with 250 or more seats, or a total facility size equal to or greater than 5,000 square feet. A hotel with an on-site food facility and 200 or more rooms. A health facility with an on-site food facility and 100 or more beds. A large venue, a large event, and those are defined in statute. A state agency with a cafeteria with 250 or more seats, or a total cafeteria facility size equal to or greater than 5,000 square feet. And lastly, a local education agency with an on-site food facility. And I'll just read those real quickly again. A restaurant with 250 or more seats, total facility size equal to 5,000 square feet. A hotel with an on-site food facility and 200 or more rooms. A health facility with an on-site food facility and 100 or more beds. A large venue, a large event. A state agency with a cafeteria with 250 or more seats, or the facility size is greater than 5,000 square feet. And lastly, a local education agency with an on-site food facility. That's a tier 2 group.
I would add really quickly, one of our colleagues who wrote this section of the regulations, she let us know that tier 1 and tier 2 edible food generators were defined specifically. So for tier 1, these are larger generators. They may already be rescuing edible food and familiar with how that works. And it may be easier for them to rescue that edible food. Whereas tier 2 commercial edible food generators, hotels that have hot food, they might not be as familiar with how they're going to rescue that. And so that 2-year difference in terms of when each edible food generator has to come into compliance allows the tier 2 food generators a bit more time to figure out how they're going to rescue the food, how they're going to come into compliance with the requirements. And so that's one of the reasons for the timing there.
Great. What cost can be recaptured locally for this program management? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. A lot of it depends on how you set up your fees now. But the statute did allow for jurisdictions to authorize fees to pay for the program, similar to the current like AB 939 programmatic fees. So many jurisdictions are currently assessing, additional staffing costs, collection costs, maybe educational costs, the enforcement costs. And in some cases, jurisdictions are working that into their the franchise fees that the residents and businesses will be paying. So that's probably a typical mechanism that jurisdictions will recover costs for implementation.
Great. Is there a sunset date for SB 1383 regulations?
No, the statute does not have a sunset date.
All right, and this one is specific to special districts. So if we need to follow up with Heather with some of CSDA specialists, we can. Special districts by California charter do not control land development, planning, permitting. How would they pass and enforce C&D recycling?
Great, thank you. We were hoping to get feedback on this particular aspect. So if construction and demolition permits are handled instead through the unincorporated county or the city for that area, which the special district that provides solid waste collection services covers, then it would end up being the county or the city that's responsible. So we weren't sure if there were any special districts that provide solid waste collection services that actually issue construction demolition permits. So likely in most cases, that's a program that will be handled and continued as it is now by say the unincorporated county, for example. So I hope that answers your question, but we'd love to do more follow-up on that if, if our understanding is different than the reality out there.
All right, and I see Nicole has been putting some things into the chat box. Nicole, do you want to kind of talk through what is in the chat box? And while she's doing that, everybody will take another couple of minutes for questions. So if you have one, pop it in the Q&A box. And Nicole, you can kind of talk through some of those resources you put in.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, just quickly wanted to provide direct links to some of the resources that I mentioned today, including a funding opportunity that is open for anaerobic digestion, if that's applicable to your agency, our ILG Recycling Resource Center, which includes the case studies that CalRecycle mentioned. Those are produced by HF&H and include stories of agencies that have collaborated with local organizations or waste haulers to prepare for 1383, everything from franchise agreements to siting to edible food recovery. So I'd really recommend checking those out. And then there's also a link to ILG's public engagement resources. Since I saw in the poll that many of you are concerned about engaging with residents and commercial entities around the regulations. We have lots and lots of tip sheets and resources on our website, and we are able to work with your agency if needed. So feel free to contact me for more information about engagements. And just as a side story, we've been hearing from some agencies that as they're preparing for 1383, and they're concerned about residents or commercial entities participating, they're coupling their education and outreach. They're kind of leveraging existing opportunities. So if they go out for an inspection or enforcement, or just they're out in the community, they try to talk about 1383 as much as possible and to get folks ready for organics recycling. So leveraging those existing opportunities is something that we're hearing now. But I'll turn it back to Jennifer for questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And everyone, I will include these links in the follow-up email with the course materials. So we have a couple more questions, ladies. from Emmanuel, do you have more information about the contamination minimization route reviews, or will Cal Recycle release more guidelines in the future? Of most concern is the expectation of amount of containers, businesses that will need to be reviewed.
Sure, I'll start with that, and Julia, feel free to add. Yeah, I appreciate the question, and certainly as we move into implementation, if there are any specific tools or guidance that you feel would be helpful, we're happy to work on that. Just to first talk about route reviews. The route reviews are, I'm just referencing the regs, the route reviews are designed such that all of the routes would be monitored annually. But what that means is containers on a particular route are randomly selected. There's not a set number of containers that need to be randomly selected. That's up to the jurisdiction. So the special district providing solid waste collection services, for the routes that you serve, you would set up what that random selection is along the route. The key is that just all the routes, either that you're servicing or your hauler is servicing, need to be reviewed annually. And the intention with the route reviews is to be able to catch contamination or issues that the generators may be having before it gets to the facility. And I get that that's not going to happen always before it gets to the facility, but the goal is to provide education. When you're seeing a route, for example, that's highly contaminated, to be able to say tag that cart or get information to those generators on that route. In some cases, you may be able to target a particular generator. In some cases, it may be just education that goes out to everyone on that route. So let me know if that answers your question with respect to what's required with route reviews. The other question was related to the businesses, and what this is focused on just doing a desk audit. It is exactly what you're doing currently under 1826, and it's continuing under 1383, meaning that the regulations require you to do a desk audit to ensure that those businesses that meet the AB 341 or AB 1826 thresholds have service and are participating, or maybe not participate, have service. So if you have a business that does not have service, come January 1, 2022, they are required to have service and you are required to provide that service. So no longer is it based on the business signing up voluntarily for that service. They must be provided and the regulations require them to participate. So let me know if that answered your question. Julia, do you have anything else to add that I might have missed?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered most of that.
All right, yes, and Emmanuel says that answered the question.
Oh, great.
Thanks for that. One more question. Is there a list of authorized backhaulers in districts, or how are they qualified?
Craig, that's a great question. There is no authorized list of backhaulers. It really is up to the district. And similar, I would assume it's what you've already been doing with implementing the mandatory commercial recycling and organics recycling laws. You know, if a business is not participating in the service that you're providing, you know, under those laws, you are supposed to be finding out what is that business doing. And they would need to inform you that they are backhauling material and you would need to confirm that that's happening. So there isn't, unfortunately, a big master list of that because no one actually permits folks to self-haul or backhaul, excuse me. So Craig, I don't know if that answered your question. I hope it did.
Fantastic. Well, ladies, that was a lot of great information and a lot of good questions. So, oh, Craig says yes. So good deal. Good deal. Well, Kara, Julia, and Nicole, thank you so much for all of the great information and for answering the attendees' questions. So with that, I will bid you guys a good day and hope to look forward to seeing you soon at future CSDA events. Have a great day.